The dimensional breach tasted like sulfur and screaming, which was approximately how Johnny Blaze's entire existence had tasted since making a deal with Mephisto 17 years ago to save his father from cancer. The deal had worked. His father lived another 6 months before dying in a motorcycle stunt gone wrong, and Johnny had been left with Zarathos, the spirit of vengeance, bonded to his soul like a tumor made of hellfire and Old Testament wrath. He'd been riding through Arizona when Vought's ritual tore reality open. One moment, desert highway under his wheels. The next, sensation of being pulled through dimensions that had no business touching, realities grinding against each other like tectonic plates made of sin and judgment. And then Madison Square Garden, New York City, a universe Johnny didn't recognize, erupting onto a stage where people in capes were smiling for cameras and selling heroism like it was toothpaste. The rider came immediately. Johnny felt Zarathos surge forward with the inevitability of a shark smelling blood, because this room, this building, this entire reality was drowning in sin so thick it made hell look clean by comparison. His flesh burned away, his skull ignited with hellfire that didn't consume, but transformed. The motorcycle beneath him became something that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, wheels burning with flames that left no mark on physical matter, but scorched souls just by proximity. And when Ghost Rider spoke, it was with Zarathos's voice, multitonal, demonic, carrying harmonics that made guilty consciences scream, sinners. On stage, the Homelander had been mid-speech about Vought International's commitment to heroism, justice, and the American way. The words died in his throat as hellfire erupted around him, and something impossible materialized from flames that shouldn't exist. "What the fuck?" Homelander said, his all-American smile fracturing into genuine confusion. "Is that?" Ghost Rider's flaming skull turned toward the man in the cape, and even without eyes, the spirit of vengeance saw the hundreds of deaths Homelander had caused or allowed, saw the plane he'd let crash rather than risk his reputation, saw the woman he'd assaulted in a supply closet, saw the innocent people he'd murdered to protect Vought's secrets, saw a soul so stained with sin that it blazed like a beacon to anything that judged guilt. "Your sin is weighed," Ghost Rider intoned, advancing on Homelander with chains that materialized from hellfire, each link inscribed with the names of the damned. "Your soul is measured, and you are found wanting." Homelander laughed, the dismissive sound of someone who'd never encountered anything he couldn't laser through or intimidate into submission. "I'm found wanting? Do you know who I am? I'm Homelander. I'm the world's greatest hero. I could kill you with a thought." "Then try," Ghost Rider invited. Homelander's eyes blazed red with heat vision, concentrated stellar radiation that could melt through steel, that had killed dozens who'd stood against him, that represented power so overwhelming that conventional weapons were meaningless. The beams struck Ghost Rider's skull and stopped, dissipated. The hellfire that wreathed the spirit of vengeance consumed Homelander's heat vision like it was candle flame, because physical force meant nothing to something that existed partially outside physics. "Impossible," Homelander whispered. "Look at me," Ghost Rider commanded, and despite every instinct telling him to flee, Homelander looked into the spirit of vengeance's flaming eye sockets. "Look at me." The penitent stare hit like a freight train made of every atrocity Homelander had ever committed. not intellectually, not as memory or regret, but as experience, forcing Homelander to feel every moment of pain, terror, and suffering he'd inflicted on others from their perspective. The mother watching her children die in the plane crash he'd failed to prevent. The woman he'd assaulted feeling her autonomy violated. The innocent people he'd murdered experiencing their final moments of realization that heroism was a lie. Homelander screamed, the most powerful supe on Earth, the invincible symbol of American heroism, fell to his knees, clawing at his own eyes, trying to make the vision stop. His psyche, which had never experienced genuine consequences or remorse, shattered under the weight of confronting exactly what he'd done to others. In the audience, chaos erupted. Vought Security, private military contractors who'd signed NDAs and buried soupy crimes for paychecks, opened fire on Ghost Rider with automatic weapons. The bullets melted 6 inches from the spirit of Vengeance's skull, turning to liquid metal that dripped harmlessly on the stage. Those who enable evil share its judgment, Ghost Rider announced, turning his attention to the security forces. His chains lashed out with supernatural speed, wrapping around the nearest guard and igniting with hellfire that burned not flesh, but soul. The guards' screams weren't physical pain. They were the sound of someone being forced to confront every crime they'd witnessed and done nothing to stop. In a skybox overlooking the chaos, Billy Butcher watched through binoculars with an expression that mixed professional assessment and genuine shock. Beside him, Huey Campbell looked like he might vomit. Mother's Milk was already on the phone, trying to get intelligence on what they were seeing, and Frenchie and Kimiko were signing rapidly to each other in the shorthand they'd developed. That, Butcher said conversationally, is not a super. Then what is it? Huey demanded. Watching Ghost Rider systematically work through Vought Security, while Homelander writhed on stage, still experiencing the penance stare's revelations. Something worse, Butcher replied. Or better, depending on your perspective. Frenchie, you getting any readings on that thing? Compound 5 signature? Anything? Frenchie consulted instruments they'd stolen from a Vought research facility. No Compound V. No biological enhancement markers. Whatever this entity is, it does not match any supe profile in our database. So it's not from Vought, Mother's Milk concluded. Which means it's not controlled by Vought. Which means, Butcher finished, his expression transforming into something predatory. It's not protected by Vought's lawyers, PR machine, or government connections. It's an outside player, when it's hurting Homelander in ways we never could. It's also killing people, Huey protested, pointing at the stage where 17 Vought security personnel were down. Not dead, but catatonic, their minds broken by being forced to experience the penance stare's judgment. That's not justice, that's exactly what we've been trying to do for years, Butcher interrupted. Hold supes accountable, make them hurt, make them face consequences. So what if the method's a bit Old Testament? A bit? Huey's voice cracked. Billy, that thing isn't distinguishing between Homelander and people who just work for Vought. It's judging everyone complicit in the system. Yeah, Butcher said, and his smile was the dangerous one that preceded terrible decisions. It is, and you know what? Maybe that's what this world needs. Not heroes. Not supes, not corporate fucking responsibility seminars. Just pure, simple judgment. You do evil, you burn for it. That's not how justice works, Huey insisted. No, Butcher agreed. That's how vengeance works. And I'm beginning to think vengeance is exactly what we need. On stage, Ghost Rider had finished with the security forces and returned his attention to Homelander, who'd finally recovered from the penance stare enough to stand on shaking legs. The Soup's eyes were bloodshot, his face pale, his all-American perfection cracked by confronting his own sins. What did you do to me?" Homelander demanded, his voice lacking its usual arrogance. "Showed you truth," Ghost Rider replied. "Forced you to experience what you inflict. That is the penance stare. Judgment without mercy, consequence without appeal. You have killed innocence. You have enabled corruption. You have worn the mantle of hero while committing atrocities that would make demons weep. Your soul is damned, and I am damnation's instrument." "I'm Homelander," the Supe insisted, though the conviction was gone from his voice. "I'm necessary. Everything I've done to protect—" "You protect nothing," Ghost Rider interrupted. "You serve only ego, only power, only the pathetic need to be worshipped by beings you consider beneath you. You are not a hero. You are a monster wearing hero's colors, and I am here to collect the debt your soul owes." Homelander's response was immediate and visceral. Flight, using his superhuman speed to escape the building, shattering windows and disappearing into New York's skyline at velocities that should have ended the pursuit. The Ghost Rider watched him go with the patience of something eternal. "You cannot run from judgment. Sin follows, guilt pursues. I will find you, John Gilman, and when I do, you will burn." The spirit of vengeance turned his attention to the remaining people in Madison Square Garden. Thousands of civilians, Vought employees, shareholders, media personnel. Most were innocent of direct crime, but some carried the stain of knowing evil and enabling it. His hellfire vision saw them as clearly as daylight. The executives who'd covered up Supe crimes, the PR team that buried evidence, the lawyers who'd threatened witnesses into silence. He began walking toward the audience, chains dragging behind him, and the crowd's panic reached critical mass as people realized the burning skull was coming for them specifically. That's when Billy Butcher did something characteristically insane. He stepped into Ghost Rider's path. "Oi!" Butcher called out, standing in the aisle while everyone around him fled. "Flamin' skull, got a minute?" Ghost Rider stopped, hellfire eyes focusing on this human who stood between him and the guilty. The spirit of vengeance saw Butcher's sins immediately, the murders he'd committed, the innocent people who died as collateral in his vendetta against Supes, the lines he'd crossed in pursuit of revenge. By any objective measure, Billy Butcher was guilty enough to warrant judgment. "You are stained," Ghost Rider observed. "You have killed. You have enabled harm through recklessness. You wear guilt like armor." "Yeah, I do," Butcher agreed. "Won't pretend otherwise. I'm a right bastard and I've done terrible things. But before you start judging, let me make you an offer. You want to burn the guilty? We'll show you where they're hiding. You want to hurt Homelander? We know his weaknesses. You want to dismantle Vought? We've spent years collecting evidence, building cases, identifying targets. But you work with us, or you're just another out-of-control Supe who thinks might makes right." "I am not a Supa," Ghost Rider corrected, his voice carrying harmonics that made Butcher's teeth hurt. "I am vengeance. I am judgment. I am what comes when justice fails and the innocent cry out for protection." "Great speech," Butcher replied. Heard similar from Homelander, actually. He also thinks he's above law and morality. Difference is, you might actually mean it. So here's the question, mate. You gonna work with humans who understand this world's systems? Or you gonna burn through everything hoping you hit more guilty than innocent? Ghost Rider studied Butcher with the intensity of something that had seen every circle of hell and found them all disappointing. Finally, where is your base of operations? Brooklyn, Butcher replied. Warehouse district. Not fancy, but it's got the advantage of not being owned by Vought or monitored by their satellites. Then lead, Ghost Rider commanded, and pray that your sins do not outweigh your usefulness. Because when this alliance ends, William Butcher, you and I will have a reckoning about every innocent who died because of your vendetta. Looking forward to it, Butcher lied, turning to lead the spirit of vengeance out of Madison Square Garden, while emergency services flooded in to deal with the catatonic Vought personnel and one very traumatized Homelander. Behind them, in Vought Tower's executive suite, Stan Edgar watched security footage of Ghost Rider's arrival with the calm expression of someone who'd seen worse crises and survived them through careful planning. He pulled up a file marked Project Revelation, Vaught's Occult Research Division, the same department whose experiments had accidentally summoned this spirit of vengeance, and began making calls. Initiate Protocol Inferno, Edgar ordered. The entity has manifested. We need containment teams, specialized ammunition, and immediate consultation with our occult specialists. Also, activate our Compound V mystical enhancement trials. If this being operates on supernatural principles, we need supes who can counter it. Begin human trials immediately. Across the city, in a warehouse that smelled of old fish and desperation, Billy Butcher led Ghost Rider to meet the boys, while wondering if he'd just made a deal with something worse than the monsters they were fighting. And in the dimensional spaces between realities, Mephisto, the demon who'd originally cursed Johnny Blaze, smiled, because chaos was spreading across another universe, and chaos was always good for business. If you want to see more supernatural forces clash with corporate superhero corruption, hit that subscribe button and drop in the comments which Marvel or DC character should face Vaught's 7 next. Ghost Rider just made Homelander scream in ways Butcher's never managed. The question is whether the spirit of vengeance is salvation or just a different kind of damnation. May the Force be with you. Continue. The warehouse in Brooklyn that served as the boys' headquarters had seen better decades, probably around the 1970s when the fishing industry still operated here, and the building's structural integrity wasn't maintained through duct tape and optimism. Now it housed stolen Vought equipment, weapons that ranged from conventional to experimental, and enough evidence of supes crimes to fill a federal courthouse if anyone in federal government wasn't already bought by Vought. Ghost Rider's entrance through the rolling door made every piece of electronic equipment in the building flicker and die, as if hellfire and modern technology were fundamentally incompatible. The spirit of vengeance surveyed the space with flames that cast shadows in directions physics didn't normally permit. And his voice carried judgment before anyone spoke. This place reeks of guilt. Blood has been spilled here, innocent and guilty both. Who are you? Who enables such darkness? We're the boys, Butcher replied, stepping forward while the rest of his team maintained careful distance from something that had made Homelander, the most powerful being on Earth, scream like a child. We fight supes. We expose Vought. We do what law enforcement and government can't or won't do because Vought owns them all. Now, you gonna judge us for that, or you gonna let us explain why you're here? The hellfire dimmed slightly, and Johnny Blaze's human form emerged from the flames. A man in his 40s, leather jacket scorched but intact, face carrying the exhaustion of someone who hadn't slept peacefully in years. When he spoke, it was his voice rather than Zarathos's, and the difference was profound. I don't want to judge anyone. I don't want to be here. I was riding through Arizona when something pulled me through dimensions. 1 second I'm on Highway 93. The next I'm on your stage with the rider taking over because... He gestured at the warehouse, at New York, visible through broken windows. Because this entire world is drowning in sin, so thick the spirit of vengeance can't stay dormant. Compound V, Frenchie said, consulting his instruments, which were slowly coming back online as Johnny's human form stabilized. Vaught's superhero serum, we believe they were experimenting with, mystical applications, trying to create supes with supernatural abilities. Perhaps their ritual created the dimensional breach that brought you here. Perfect, Johnny said bitterly. So I'm here because some corporation was playing with forces they don't understand. And now I'm stuck in a universe where the rider won't let me stay human for more than an hour at a time, because every direction I look, someone's committing an atrocity. Yeah, that's pretty much this world, Huey offered, his natural empathy overriding his terror of the flaming skull demon. Vought created superheroes, gave them Compound 5 that makes them nearly invincible, and then marketed them as saviors while covering up every crime they commit. Murder, rape, mass casualty events, all of it gets buried by lawyers and PR teams. The legal system can't touch them. The government won't stop them. So we do. And how many innocents have died in your war? Johnny asked, his eyes human brown but carrying hellfire's afterimage, focusing on each of the boys in turn. Because the rider shows me your sins too. Butchers killed dozens, many of them Vought employees who weren't supes, weren't enhanced, were just people collecting paychecks. Frenchie's got a past as an assassin, bodies that don't make neat categories of guilty and innocent. Even you, he looked at Huey, you've killed when pushed. When the rider takes over again, and he will take over, none of you are protected by good intentions or just causes. Guilt is guilt. The silence that followed was heavy, with the recognition that they'd invited judgment into their headquarters, and judgment didn't care about context or necessity or the greater good. So what you're saying, Mother's Milk said carefully, is that we're all targets for your demon ghost thing. I'm saying, Johnny replied, that Zarathos doesn't distinguish between Homelander's murders and yours. The spirit of vengeance sees sin as binary. You've spilled innocent blood, you face consequences. The only reason I haven't transformed yet is because I'm fighting to stay human, fighting to understand this world before the rider decides everyone here deserves to burn. Then let's give you a reason to stay human, Butcher suggested, pulling up files on a laptop that had survived Ghost Rider's entrance. Vaught's Occult Research Division, the wankers who probably pulled you here, they operate out of sub-levels beneath Vought Tower, levels so classified that even most Vought executives don't know they exist. We've been trying to access those levels for 2 years. Can't get through the security, can't bypass the biometrics, can't even confirm what they're doing down there beyond rumors about supernatural Compound V trials. And you think I can get you access, Johnny concluded. I think, Butcher corrected, that if those levels contain the research that brought you here, they might contain information about how to send you home. Dimensional breach technology, mystical frameworks, whatever occult bollocks they were playing with. You want to get back to your world. That's probably where the answers are. Johnny studied Butcher with the assessment of someone who'd been manipulated by demons for years and recognized when humans were attempting similar tactics. You're offering me a way home in exchange for using Ghost Rider to breach Vought's most secure facility. That about cover it? Also in exchange for not judging us till after we've had a chance to explain why we've done what we've done, Huey added. You said the Rider sees sin as binary, but we're not binary. We've killed people who maybe didn't deserve killing. We've crossed lines we shouldn't have crossed. But we've also stopped supes from murdering innocents, exposed crimes that would have stayed buried, and fought a system that grinds up regular people for profit. That has to count for something. Does it? Johnny asked quietly. I've been carrying the spirit of vengeance for 17 years. I've tried to be good, to only target the truly guilty, to use the Rider's power for justice instead of revenge. But Zarathos doesn't care about my intentions. The spirit judges action, not motivation. You killed innocents. You face consequences. You enabled evil. You burn for it. The penance stare doesn't accept excuses about greater good or necessary evil, or the ends justifying the means. Then you understand, Homelander. Kimiko signed, with Frenchie translating. He also believes his actions are justified. He also thinks he's above judgment because his power makes him necessary. If you judge us by the same standards you judge him, you're proving that power, any power, even supernatural vengeance, corrupts absolutely. The observation hit harder than conventional weapons could. Johnny had spent years wrestling with exactly that question. Was he any better than the criminals he judged? If his judgment came from demonic possession rather than legal authority? Was vengeance administered by a spirit who burned souls fundamentally different from vigilante murder? I don't have answers, Johnny admitted. I'm not a philosopher or a lawyer. I'm a stunt rider who made a deal with a demon to save my father, and I've been paying for that deal every day since. But I do know this. If Vought is experimenting with the kind of forces that pulled me here, they're playing with damnation, literally. And if I can stop them from doing to others what Mephisto did to me, maybe that's worth staying human long enough to help. Then we got a deal, Butcher decided, extending his hand. You help us infiltrate Vought's sublevels. We help you find a way home. And we agree to table the whole who deserves judgment conversation until after we've stopped Vought from creating an army of demon-possessed supes. Fair. Johnny hesitated, knowing that shaking a deal with Billy Butcher was probably only slightly less dangerous than making deals with demons. But what choice did he have? Stay in this universe transforming into Ghost Rider every few hours, burning through guilty and innocent alike? Or work with people who at least claimed to be fighting for something beyond pure revenge? He shook Butcher's hand. Fair, but understand. When the Rider takes over, I can't control where he goes or who he judges. If your sins call to him, if innocent blood you've spilled cries out for vengeance, no deal we make will protect you. The spirit of vengeance doesn't negotiate. We'll take our chances, Butcher replied, though his smile was tight. The planning took 3 hours, during which Johnny learned more about the boy's universe than he'd ever wanted to know. Vought International was worse than any single criminal he'd faced. A corporate structure that commodified heroism, weaponized celebrity, and buried atrocities under marketing campaigns. The Seven weren't heroes in any meaningful sense. They were products whose crimes were PR problems rather than legal ones. Homelander's the worst, Huey explained, pulling up files documenting atrocities that made Johnny feel the rider, stirring even in human form. He's killed hundreds of people, let Flight 37 crash rather than risk his reputation trying to save it, sexually assaulted women who couldn't fight back, he murdered anyone who threatened to expose him, and Vought covers it all up because he's their most profitable asset. The penance stare didn't work on him completely, Johnny observed. I felt his soul when I hit him with it. He experienced the suffering he caused, but he didn't break the way most people do. Why? Because he's a sociopath, Mother's Milk replied. He doesn't feel guilt the way normal people do. He understands that he hurt people, but he doesn't care. That's what makes him so dangerous. No remorse, no conscience, just ego and power. Then the penance stare won't kill him, Johnny concluded grimly. It'll hurt him, make him experience his victim's pain, but it won't destroy him, because destruction requires guilt. Without guilt, he's immune to the rider's primary weapon. But not immune to hellfire, Butcher observed. Not immune to supernatural chains. Not immune to being punched by something stronger than he is. You hurt him today. First time I've ever seen Homelander genuinely hurt. That's worth more than you know. Before Johnny could respond, the warehouse's perimeter alarms activated. Motion sensors, thermal detection, electromagnetic scanning systems that the boys had stolen from various Vought facilities over the years. Frenchie pulled up security feeds showing something that made everyone in the room tense. Merde, Frenchie whispered. A train, outside, with what appears to be military support? On the screens, A train stood at the warehouse entrance with a dozen heavily armed soldiers, wearing equipment that didn't match any conventional military. The speedster was clearly terrified, but trying to hide it behind bravado, addressing security cameras he knew were watching. Butcher, we know you're in there. We know you've got that thing, that demon, whatever it is. Vought wants to make a deal. You send out the demon, we leave you alone. You don't, and we come in with weapons specifically designed to kill things that aren't from this world. Weapons that kill supernatural entities, Johnny repeated, feeling the rider stir with interest rather than concern. That's what Vought's been developing in those sub-levels, anti-demon weapons. They must have been preparing for this since they started their occult experiments. Can they actually hurt you? Huey asked. Unknown, Johnny admitted. The rider's been hurt before. Angelic weapons work, certain mystical artifacts. If Vought's been studying demonology, they might have developed something that... The transformation hit without warning. One moment Johnny was speaking in human form. The next, Zarathos surged forward with the force of 17 years of suppressed judgment, finally encountering targets too sinful to ignore. The hellfire consumed Johnny's flesh, leaving only the flaming skull, the leather jacket that existed somehow both in and outside physical reality, and chains that materialized from dimensions where punishment was the only law. A train, Ghost Rider's voice carried through the warehouse walls, through distance directly into the speedster's consciousness like a brand made of guilt. You have killed innocence, you have fled justice, you have valued speed over responsibility. Your sins are manifest, your soul cries out for judgment. A train's bravado shattered immediately. He'd watched footage of what Ghost Rider did to Homelander, had seen the pennant stare break the most powerful supe on Earth. And unlike Homelander, A-Train actually felt guilt about some of his crimes. Robin's death, his girlfriend Popclaw's death, the dozens of civilians he'd killed through reckless speedster collisions. "Fuck this," A-Train said, his nerve breaking. "Fuck the deal, fuck Vought, I'm not dying for—" He ran, used his superhuman speed to flee at velocities approaching Mach 3, becoming a blur that conventional eyes couldn't track. The military unit Vought had provided opened fire at the warehouse with weapons that shouldn't have existed in conventional arsenals. Bullets inscribed with symbols from the Lesser Key of Solomon. Grenades containing blessed salt and silver. Even a flamethrower that somehow burned with cold fire that felt wrong against the rider's perception. Ghost Rider walked through the barrage like it was rain. The mystical bullets struck his flaming skull and either melted or bounced off depending on the specific enchantment used. The blessed salt grenades made him pause. Actual discomfort rather than complete immunity, but didn't stop his advance. And when one soldier got close enough with the cold fire flamethrower, Ghost Rider simply grabbed the weapon, turned its flames back on its wielder, and spoke. "Your employers sent you to die fighting something you don't understand. That is their sin, not yours. But you accepted the mission knowing what I did to your colleagues at Madison Square Garden. That is your sin. Choose. Face me now and receive judgment. Or flee and live, knowing you enabled evil for a paycheck." The soldier, former Marine, combat veteran, someone who'd seen death before but never something like this, dropped his weapon and ran. The rest of Vought's team followed his lead, abandoning equipment and positions in a rout that would have been comedic if it wasn't proof of how thoroughly Ghost Rider had broken their confidence. Inside the warehouse, the boys watched the spirit of vengeance defend their position without their assistance, and the reality of their alliance crystallized. They'd partnered with something that treated military assault teams as minor inconveniences, something that scared A-Train into fleeing at speeds that had previously made him feel invincible. Is something that was simultaneously their greatest weapon against Vought and their greatest threat if it decided they deserved judgment. "He's going after A-Train," Mother's Milk observed, watching Ghost Rider summon his motorcycle from hellfire and tear off into New York streets at speeds that matched the speedster. "That boy's gonna die." "Maybe he deserves to," Butcher said, though his tone carried less conviction than usual. "And maybe we all deserve to," Huey countered. "That's what scares me about Ghost Rider. He doesn't distinguish between degrees of sin. A train killed Robin accidentally while fleeing a crime scene. That's manslaughter, maybe second-degree murder. It's terrible, but it's not the same as Homelander deliberately murdering innocent people. But Ghost Rider treats them the same. Both guilty, both deserving of hellfire." "Then it's a good thing we're not on his list," Butcher replied. "Yet." Across the city, A-Train discovered that speed meant nothing when your pursuer rode roads that didn't exist, appearing wherever guilt led regardless of distance or direction. He ran through Manhattan, through Brooklyn, across the Queensboro Bridge, but everywhere he went, Ghost Rider was there, chains lashing out, hellfire consuming the streets, the spirit of vengeance closing distance with the inevitability of consequences finally arriving. The chase ended in Central Park when A-Train's heart, damaged from years of compound V abuse and high-velocity sprinting, finally gave out. He collapsed mid-stride, clutching his chest, his superhuman speed unable to outrun the mundane reality of human biology stressed beyond breaking point. Ghost Rider approached the fallen supe with chains dragging through grass that withered at Hellfire's touch. A-Train looked up at the flaming skull, saw his own death approaching, and did something unexpected. He apologized. "I'm sorry," A-Train gasped. "Robin, Popclaw, all the people I hurt, I'm sorry. I know it doesn't fix anything. I know sorry doesn't bring them back, but I'm sorry." Ghost Rider stopped. The rider always stopped when genuine remorse presented itself, because vengeance and justice weren't the same thing. "Look at me, Reginald Franklin. Look into the flames and see what you've become." The penance stare struck like divine judgment. A train experienced Robin's final moments, her terror, her pain, her last thought that this couldn't be happening. He felt Popclaw's betrayal and death, the guilt she carried for his crimes eating at her until Vought's assassins arrived. He lived through every civilian casualty his reckless speed had caused, every family destroyed by the hero too concerned with fame to slow down. When the penance stare released him, A-Train was weeping, genuine tears, not performance, the kind of emotional breakdown that came from confronting exactly what you'd done without excuse or justification. "What happens now?" A-Train asked. "You kill me? I burn?" "Now," Ghost Rider said, his voice carrying less demonic resonance than before. "You choose. You can continue serving Vought, continue pretending your sins don't matter, because you're fast enough to outrun consequences. Or you can face justice, turn yourself in, confess your crimes, accept the punishment you've avoided because Vought protected you. Your soul's damnation is not yet complete, but if you choose wrong again, next time we meet, the penance stare will be the least of what you experience." Ghost Rider left A-Train weeping in Central Park, returned to Brooklyn, and transformed back into Johnny Blaze, with the exhaustion of someone who just fought a war inside his own soul. "Did you kill him?" Butcher asked when Johnny stumbled back into the warehouse. "No," Johnny replied. He felt genuine remorse. "First time I've encountered that in this universe, so I gave him a choice." "You think he'll take it? Confess everything?" "I think," Johnny said, "that's between him and his conscience. My job is judgment, not rehabilitation. Speaking of which, when do we hit Vought Tower? Because every hour I'm in this universe, the rider gets stronger. Eventually, I won't be able to stay human at all. And when that happens, everyone in the city becomes a target for judgment. Guilty and innocent both." "Tomorrow night," Butcher decided, "we infiltrate during Vought's annual shareholder gala. Half the company's executives will be distracted by corporate theater. Security will be focused on protecting rich wankers in tuxedos. That's when we breach the sub-levels and find out what occult secrets Vought's been burying." "And if we find a way to send me home?" Johnny asked. "Then you go home," Butcher replied. "But before you do, you help us burn Vought Tower to the ground. Metaphorically speaking, mostly." Johnny looked at the boys, vigilantes, murderers, people whose sins would eventually call to the rider for judgment, and recognized kindred spirits. They were all damned in their own ways, all fighting monsters while becoming monsters themselves. all trapped in cycles of violence that served vengeance disguised as justice. But at least they were honest about what they were, which was more than Vought could say. "Deal," Johnny said. "But remember, when Ghost Rider comes for his reckoning with you, I won't be able to stop him. The spirit of vengeance collects all debts eventually, even the ones owed by people fighting on the side of angels." "We'll burn that bridge when we come to it," Butcher replied, and Johnny couldn't tell if the man was being literal or metaphorical. Given that Ghost Rider was involved, probably both. Vought Tower's annual shareholder gala was corporate theater performed with the budget of a small nation's GDP. Chandeliers that cost more than houses, champagne fountains that would make Versailles look modest, and an atmosphere of wealth so concentrated it felt like moral accusation made manifest. The seven circulated through crowds of investors and executives, performing heroism as customer service. Homelander's forced smile never reaching his still bloodshot eyes. Queen Maeve drinking heavily in corners while avoiding conversation. The Deep desperately trying to rebuild his reputation with anyone who'd listen. A-Train was notably absent, having disappeared after the Central Park incident. Vought's official statement claimed personal time for health concerns, which was corporate euphemism for "our speedster had a complete psychological breakdown and we're managing the PR catastrophe." In the sub-basement 17 levels below the gala's opulence, Ghost Rider and the boys breached security with a combination of supernatural power and stolen access codes. Johnny had stayed human for the infiltration, barely, his eyes flickering between brown and hellfire red as Zarathos strained against the concentration required to maintain flesh, while Butcher's team disabled biometric scanners and bypassed encryption that would have stopped conventional thieves. "These levels aren't on any building plans," Frenchie observed, consulting schematics they'd stolen from a Vought contractor. According to official documentation, the tower's sub-basements only go to level 5. But we're now at level 17 and the elevator shaft continues deeper. "How deep?" Huey asked, his voice tight with the specific anxiety of someone who'd learned that when Vought built secret levels beneath their headquarters, bad things lived there. "At least 30 levels, Frenchie replied. "Maybe more. The structural engineering alone is remarkable. This goes deeper than subway tunnels, deeper than sewage infrastructure. They've built a second tower pointing downward into bedrock and geological strata that shouldn't support this kind of construction." "Occult engineering," Johnny said, his demon-enhanced senses detecting wrongness in the architecture itself. "The walls are inscribed with symbols I recognize from demonology texts. Binding circles, containment wards. They're not just researching supernatural forces down here, they're imprisoning them." The corridor terminated at a vault door that would have stopped conventional breaching equipment for days. Ghost Rider walked up to it, placed one flaming hand against reinforced steel, and spoke a word in a language that predated human civilization. The door's locking mechanisms, mechanical, electronic, and mystical, all failed simultaneously, recognizing the presence of something that superseded their authority. Inside was Vought's greatest sin. The chamber stretched the length of a football field, filled with containment cells constructed from materials that hurt to look at directly. Alloys infused with sacred geometry, glass that existed partially outside three-dimensional space, restraints forged from melted-down artifacts that had once been used in exorcisms. And in those cells, children, dozens of them, ages ranging from maybe 8 to 15. Each one showed signs of compound Vi injection, the characteristic luminescence in their eyes, the subtle wrongness in their proportions that marked enhanced physiology. But overlaying the compound 5 was something worse. Occult markings carved or branded into their skin, sigils that bound demonic forces to juvenile hosts too young to consent and too weak to resist. Mon Dieu, Frenchie whispered, his face pale. They've been creating, what? Demon-possessed superheroes? Mystically enhanced supes? Trying to, Johnny corrected, his voice strained as the rider surged forward in response to innocent suffering. But the binding's incomplete. These kids aren't possessed. They're trapped between dimensions. Their bodies are here, but their souls are partially displaced into hell. They're experiencing damnation while still alive. Can you free them? Huey asked. Unknown, Johnny admitted. The binding magic is sophisticated. Vought didn't just play with forces they didn't understand. They understood them well enough to create something genuinely unprecedented. These children are anchored to both this reality and hell simultaneously. Cutting the binding might kill them. Leaving them bound definitely damns them. There's no good option. Since when has that stopped us? Mother's Milk demanded, already moving toward the nearest cell. We get them out. We get them to medical facilities. We figure out how to fix them afterward. We don't leave kids in Vought's hellish science project. The decision was made. The boys began breaching containment cells while Johnny examined the occult architecture, trying to understand what Vought had been attempting. The answer, when it revealed itself, was worse than anticipated. They weren't trying to possess these kids with random demons, Johnny realized, reading research notes abandoned on a laboratory workstation. They were trying to create controlled spirits of vengeance. Synthetic ghost riders bound to Vought's will rather than cosmic justice. The ritual that pulled me here wasn't an accident. It was the culmination of years of research into how to weaponize judgment itself. Can they do it? Butcher asked. Create more of you, but ones that work for Vought. They're failing, Johnny replied, gesturing at the tortured children. The spirit of vengeance can't be controlled. That's its fundamental nature. Zarathos is bound to me through Mephisto's curse, but even Mephisto can't fully control where the rider directs judgment. Vought tried to shortcut the process by binding lesser demons to enhanced children and constraining them with occult mathematics. The result is these kids trapped in perpetual torment, while the demons try to escape and the compound V tries to stabilize physiology that's literally being torn between dimensions. So what happens if we free them? Huey asked. Before Johnny could answer, alarms throughout the facility activated with the distinctive shriek of systems detecting containment breach. And on monitors throughout the chamber, a face appeared. Not Homelander, not any of the 7, but someone whose presence carried more authority than any supie, Stan Edgar, Vought International's CEO. Mr. Blaze, Edgar said, his voice carrying the measured calm of someone who'd planned for this contingency. Or should I say, Ghost Rider, we've been expecting you. In fact, we've been preparing for you since the moment our initial ritual created the dimensional breach. Everything you've encountered since arriving in our universe has been managed, observed, and studied. Your conflict with Homelander, your alliance with the boys, even your current infiltration of our research levels, all of it has provided invaluable data about how supernatural entities operate in our reality. You wanted him here, Butcher realized. The ritual that brought him wasn't an accident, it was bait. You wanted to study a genuine spirit of vengeance to perfect your synthetic versions. Correct, Edgar confirmed, though study undersells the achievement. We've successfully mapped Ghost Rider's dimensional signature, analyzed his Hellfire's quantum properties, and most importantly, identified the specific frequencies that allow Zarathos to override Johnny Blaze's consciousness, which means Edgar pressed something off screen and the chamber's walls activated with light that hurt to perceive. We can now force transformations, remove the human element, and observe the spirit of vengeance operating without Johnny Blaze's moral restraint. Johnny felt it immediately, a frequency that resonated with Zarathos's presence, amplifying the demon's influence while suppressing human consciousness. The transformation hit like a sledgehammer, Johnny's flesh burning away as Ghost Rider manifested with none of the reluctant control that characterized their usual relationship. This was the Rider unbound, Zarathos without Johnny's human conscience tempering judgment, the spirit of vengeance at full power and entirely focused on the sins surrounding him. "Run!" Ghost Rider commanded the boys, his voice carrying harmonics that made reality shudder. "The judgment comes, the guilty burn, and you are all guilty." "Bloody hell," Butcher whispered, recognizing that their alliance had just shattered. "He's not Johnny anymore, he's pure vengeance, and we're on his list." The boys ran while Ghost Rider began systematically destroying Vought's research facility. Hellfire consumed decades of occult research. Chains shattered containment cells, freeing the tortured children regardless of whether freedom killed them, because death was mercy compared to continued torment. And the spirit of vengeance moved through the facility, with the inexorability of consequences finally arriving, burning everything that carried the stain of sin. On level 16, Ghost Rider encountered the deep, attempting to flee through maintenance corridors. The aquatic supe had been in the tower for the gala, had descended when alarms activated out of misplaced heroism, and now faced something that made ocean predators look gentle. "I didn't know about the kids," the deep pleaded, backing against a wall while Ghost Rider advanced. "I swear I didn't know Vought was doing this. I'm not part of their research division, I'm just guilty," Ghost Rider pronounced, "of assault, of abuse, of using power to exploit the vulnerable. Your sins cry out. Your victims demand justice. Look at me." The penance stare hit the deep like divine retribution. Every woman he'd assaulted, every person he'd coerced, every abuse of power he'd committed while hiding behind Vought's protection. All of it became inescapable experience. The deep felt what his victims felt. The violation, the humiliation, the knowledge that no one would believe them because heroes were above accusation. When the penance stare released him, the deep was catatonic, mind broken by being forced to confront his own crimes, psyche shattered under the weight of guilt he'd spent years burying beneath narcissism and self-pity. Ghost Rider left him there and continued hunting. On level 12, he found Queen Maeve waiting, not fleeing, not fighting, just standing in a corridor with a bottle of whiskey and an expression of someone who'd made peace with consequences, finally arriving. "I knew this was coming," Maeve said, her voice carrying the exhaustion of 7 years, enabling Homelander's atrocities. "Knew eventually someone or something would come for us. Thought it might be the boys, maybe another supa with a conscience. Didn't expect a literal demon, but honestly, makes sense. We've done demon shit, deserve demon judgment. You are guilty, Ghost Rider confirmed, of complicity, of cowardice, of watching innocents die while doing nothing to prevent it. You wear the mantle of hero while enabling atrocity. Your soul is stained with sins of omission, as dark as sins of commission. I know, Maeve replied. I've known for years. So go ahead, hit me with your penance stare. Make me feel what Homelander's victims felt while I stood by and let it happen. I deserve it. Ghost Rider studied her. This woman whose greatest sin was not action but inaction, not malice but cowardice. The spirit of vengeance saw guilt genuine enough to warrant mercy, but also saw crimes that demanded consequence. Look at me, Ghost Rider commanded. The penance stare showed Maeve every moment she could have stopped Homelander and didn't. Every civilian death she could have prevented with a word to authorities. Every crime she witnessed and buried because speaking out meant losing fame, wealth, and the illusion that she was still a hero. The weight of complicity was crushing, not as dark as active malice, but dark enough to damn a soul that once had potential for genuine heroism. When the penance stare released her, Maeve was weeping. But unlike the deep, she remained conscious, remained aware, remained capable of choice. What do I do now? Maeve asked. How do I fix this? You cannot fix it, Ghost Rider replied. The dead do not return. The innocent you failed to save remain dead, but you can prevent future harm. You can confess. You can testify. You can use your voice to expose what you once hid. That is not redemption, but it is the beginning of atonement. Ghost Rider left Maeve alive, scarred, guilty, but capable of choosing better going forward. Because judgment wasn't only about punishment. Sometimes it was about forcing people to confront what they'd become and choosing whether to remain that way. On level 3, Ghost Rider encountered something unexpected. Homelander, waiting with equipment that shouldn't have existed in conventional reality. Weapons forged from melted-down religious artifacts, armor inscribed with protective wards that had taken Vought's occult researchers years to perfect. And most concerning, a containment field generating the same frequency Edgar had used to force Ghost Rider's transformation, but inverted, designed to suppress Zarathos and trap Johnny Blaze in human form. You made me scream, Homelander said, his voice carrying genuine hatred rather than performative arrogance. In front of shareholders, in front of cameras, you made the world see me hurt. No one sees me hurt. No one makes me look weak, so I'm going to return the favor. I'm going to trap you in your weak human form, and then I'm going to spend hours killing you, slowly, painfully, while Vought records everything for research purposes. The containment field activated, and Ghost Rider felt Zarathos being suppressed, pushed down, constrained, forced into dormancy by technology that had been specifically designed to counter supernatural possession. The hellfire dimmed, the chains dissolved, and Johnny Blaze's human form emerged, vulnerable and mortal, facing the most powerful supes on Earth, with nothing but leather jacket and a lifetime of bad decisions. Well, Johnny said, his voice hoarse, this is gonna suck. Homelander's smile was genuine, the expression of a predator finally cornering prey that had wounded its pride. Oh yes, yes it is. Johnny Blaze had been mortal and powerless before, the years before Mephisto's curse, when he'd been just a stunt rider with more courage than sense. The brief windows between Zarathos's manifestations, when humanity returned with exhaustion and regret. But he'd never been powerless while facing something like Homelander, a being whose strength could crush steel, whose speed exceeded human perception, whose heat vision could vaporize concrete. "You know what the best part is?" Homelander asked, circling Johnny with the leisurely confidence of someone who had literally all the time in the world. "Your demon ghost thing? It made me feel something I haven't felt in years. Fear, real, genuine, oh fuck, I might actually die fear. And you want to know what I realized while I was screaming on that stage?" He leaned close, his breath hot against Johnny's face. "I liked it. The fear, the pain, the sense that maybe I wasn't the most powerful thing in the universe. It was interesting, novel. So I'm going to make you feel that fear, that pain, that sense of absolute helplessness. And I'm going to enjoy every second." "Speeches before violence," Johnny observed, stalling while his mind raced through options. Always a sign of psychological issues. Demons do the same thing, talk endlessly about how they're gonna torture you because the anticipation is part of the power trip. "You got more in common with Hell's residents than you think, John Gilman." Homelander's smile vanished. "Don't use that name. That name died when Vought made me into Homelander. That name was a weakness. I am not weak." "You're so weak you need to beat a powerless human to feel strong," Johnny countered, because if he was going to die, he'd die pissing off the monster. "That's the weakest thing I've ever seen. Zarathos might be a demon, but at least he only punishes the guilty. You kill whoever's convenient and call it heroism. That's not strength, that's just evil with a publicist." The first blow shattered 3 of Johnny's ribs with the casual ease of swatting a fly. The second broke his left arm at the elbow. The third sent him flying across the corridor to impact wall with force that would have killed someone without Johnny's supernatural resilience. Vestigial durability from years bonded to Zarathos that kept him alive if not intact. "Keep talking," Homelander invited. "Your mouth is what's keeping you conscious right now. The second you stop entertaining me, I start ripping off pieces, starting with fingers, then toes, then we get creative." 3 levels above, the boys had reached an emergency exit, but Huey stopped at the threshold. "We can't leave him," Huey said. "Johnny's down there with Homelander, human, powerless. If we run, he dies. If we stay, we all die," Butcher countered, but his voice lacked conviction. "Ghost Rider's not our friend. Soon as Edgar's suppression field fails, the Rider's gonna judge us same as he judged Vought. We got lucky he was distracted by the facility's sins long enough for us to escape. We push that luck, we burn." "So we let him die because it's convenient?" Huey demanded. "That's Vought logic. That's exactly the kind of calculation that got us into this mess in the first place." "The kid's right," Mother's Milk said quietly. "We brought Ghost Rider here. We made an alliance. That means something, or it should." Butcher was silent for a long moment, the kind of silence that preceded either wise decisions or catastrophically stupid ones, and with Butcher, the distinction was academic. "Frenchie, you got any way to disrupt Edgar's suppression field?" "Oui," Frenchie replied, pulling out equipment he'd stolen from Vought's research levels during their retreat. "The field operates on specific frequencies that resonate with demonic signatures. If we can introduce electromagnetic interference at those frequencies, it should destabilize the suppression." But he paused, his expression grim. Destabilizing the field means Ghost Rider returns at full power, in a facility full of people who are technically guilty of enabling Vought's crimes, including us. We'll burn that bridge when we come to it, Butcher decided, throwing his own words back at himself. Let's go save the literal demon from hell, because apparently that's what we do now. On level 3, Johnny was running out of clever comments and blood in approximately equal measure. Homelander had broken most of his bones without killing him, demonstrating the kind of precision that came from years of knowing exactly how much damage the human body could sustain before expiring. "You're tougher than normal humans," Homelander observed, examining his hand where Johnny's blood had splattered. "Some kind of residual supernatural durability from your demon possession. Fascinating. Vought's going to have fun studying your corpse, figuring out what makes you special, then replicating it for their next generation of supes." "You ever wonder," Johnny wheezed through broken ribs, "why you need validation so badly? Why you care what Vought thinks, what shareholders think, what random people on the street think? You got all the power in the world, but you're still a child desperate for approval. That's the saddest goddamn thing about you. You could be anything, and you chose to be Vought's product." The heat vision came without warning. Not enough to kill, just enough to burn, searing Johnny's shoulder with concentrated radiation that made his nerve endings scream. Homelander was proving a point. He could hurt Johnny forever if he wanted, and no one would stop him. That's when the suppression field flickered. It was subtle, a momentary disruption in the frequency that kept Zarathos dormant, but subtle was enough. The spirit of vengeance had been straining against containment since the field activated, and the instant it weakened, Zarathos surged forward with the force of 17 years of suppressed judgment finally encountering the being who dared to hurt his host. The transformation was violent. Johnny's broken body erupted into hellfire that consumed damage, replaced shattered bones with supernatural structure, and manifested Ghost Rider with the specific fury that came from being wounded while powerless. "You dare!" Ghost Rider's voice carried harmonics that made reality shudder. "You dare assault the Rider's host. You dare believe your power exceeds vengeance itself. Your arrogance will be your damnation." Homelander's expression transformed from triumph to genuine fear, the same fear he'd felt at Madison Square Garden, amplified by recognition that he'd just made a terrible mistake. "The field," Edgar said the field would hold. "Your master lied," Ghost Rider replied, "or underestimated. It matters not. Your sins are manifest, your judgment is at hand, and this time there will be no mercy." The fight that followed was less combat and more divine retribution, enacted through physical force. Ghost Rider's chains wrapped around Homelander with strength that exceeded the soup's ability to break free, each link inscribed with the names of his victims, burning not flesh, but soul. The penance stare struck with amplified intensity, not just forcing Homelander to experience his victim's suffering, but making him understand what he'd become. Not human, not hero, just a weapon in human form, wielded by people who saw him as product rather than person. For the first time in his life, Homelander felt genuine remorse. Not about his crimes, he was still fundamentally a sociopath, but about what those crimes had made him. He'd spent decades believing he was special, chosen, superior. The penance stare showed him truth. He was Vought's creation, their tool, no more significant than any other product they'd manufactured and sold. The revelation broke something in Homelander's psyche. Not his power, not his body, but his sense of self. He'd defined himself by superiority, by being the strongest, the most important, the most necessary. Discovering he was merely merchandise. Expensive, effective merchandise, but merchandise nonetheless. Shattered the ego that had sustained him through years of atrocity. When Ghost Rider released him, Homelander wasn't dead, but he was changed. Broken in ways that wouldn't heal through regeneration or Compound V. The most powerful supe on Earth reduced to something smaller, more afraid, and infinitely more dangerous because fear made him unpredictable. "Go," Ghost Rider commanded. "Return to your masters. Tell them what you have learned. Vengeance cannot be suppressed. Judgment cannot be contained. And if they continue their occult experiments, next time I will not show mercy." Homelander fled, used his flight to escape Vought Tower at speeds approaching Mach 5, leaving behind his dignity, his confidence, and the last remnants of the persona he'd built across decades of corporate heroism. Ghost Rider turned to find the boys emerging from shadows, led by Butcher, whose expression mixed relief and wariness. "You came back!" Johnny's voice emerged from the rider, human consciousness and demonic presence speaking simultaneously. "You could have escaped. Should have escaped. Why?" "Because we made a deal," Butcher replied, "and unlike Vought, we honor ours. You help us access the research division. We help you find a way home. That still stands, even if you're planning to judge us afterward." "The judgment stands," Ghost Rider confirmed, "but it can wait. First, we end Vought's occult experiments permanently. What they found in the lowest levels was worse than the tortured children, worse than the demonic binding research. If Vought had successfully created a stable dimensional breach, a gateway that could pull entities from other realities, including hell itself. The ritual that brought Johnny here hadn't been exploratory research. It had been a test run for something larger. They're planning to harvest demons, Frenchie realized, reading research documents with growing horror. Create an army of controlled supernatural entities, bind them to Compound V-enhanced hosts, and market them as the next generation of heroes. Ghost Riders they can control, demons they can weaponize, all of it sold to governments and corporations as peacekeeping assets. "Can they actually do it?" Huey asked. "They're failing," Johnny replied, his human voice emerging as Zarathos's presence receded slightly. "The binding magic doesn't work the way they think it does. You can't control demons through mathematics and containment fields. They're chaos given form. The more you try to constrain them, the more violently they resist. But Vought's willing to sacrifice however many hosts it takes to perfect the process. Children, adults, doesn't matter to them. They see the potential profit and damn the consequences. Then we destroy the breach," Mother's Milk decided. "Burn the research, collapse the gateway, end this before they successfully summon something worse than what's already here." "You cannot destroy it," Ghost Rider said. "The breach exists across dimensions. Closing it from this side merely delays. It must be sealed from both sides simultaneously, which means someone must cross through and close it from hell itself." "Someone meaning you," Butcher concluded. "Someone meaning Johnny Blaze," Ghost Rider corrected. "The rider cannot cross. Zarathos is bound to this plane through Mephisto's curse, but Johnny can cross, can reach the breach's other side, can seal it permanently." "And if he does?" Huey asked. "He gets home." "Unknown," Ghost Rider admitted. The breach connects this reality to hell, not to Johnny's original universe. Crossing might trap him in hell eternally, or might allow him to navigate dimensional pathways back to his reality. The outcome is uncertain, but the alternative is Vought successfully summoning demon armies. That outcome is certain. Johnny felt control returning, Zarathos receding as human consciousness reasserted dominance. The choice was his. Stay in this universe, continue fighting Vought with the Rider's power. You leave the dimensional breach active for someone else to deal with. Or cross through, seal the gateway from hell's side. Accept the possibility of being trapped in damnation forever in exchange for preventing Vought from weaponizing the damned. Not much of a choice, Johnny said. But then again, my life's been full of bad choices. Might as well make one more for the right reasons. He approached the dimensional breach, a tier in reality that smelled of sulfur and showed glimpses of hell's landscape beyond. Familiar territory. He'd been there before during the worst periods of Zarathos's possession, when the Rider dragged him through lower dimensions to show him what damnation looked like. If I don't make it back, Johnny said to the boys, tell people what Vought was doing here. Not just the soupy crimes, the occult experiments, the demon binding, the children they tortured trying to create synthetic vengeance. That matters more than whether one more Ghost Rider exists in the multiverse. We'll tell them, Huey promised. And if we're lying? Butcher asked, because he was Butcher and couldn't help being himself. If we take the evidence and bury it same as Vought would, because exposing occult research brings attention we don't need. Then the Rider will return, Johnny replied, and his smile carried Hellfire's echo. Zarathos knows where to find you. In this life or the next, vengeance collects all debts, even the ones owed by people who fought monsters. Johnny crossed through the dimensional breach, leaving behind the sound of reality tearing and the boys watching something that might have been heroism or might have been suicide with Ghost Rider. Now, the distinction was always complicated. On Hell's side, Johnny found himself in a landscape of suffering that made Vought's crimes look amateur. But he also found the breach's anchor, a construct of occult mathematics and demon binding that held the gateway stable between dimensions. Destroying it would seal the breach, but destruction required Ghost Rider's hellfire, and manifesting the Rider in hell meant giving Zarathos access to his home dimension with no guarantee Johnny could maintain control. You want to come home? Johnny asked Zarathos, feeling the demon's presence stir with interest. Want to stay in hell where you belong instead of being bound to a mortal who fights you every day? I'll give you that choice. You help me destroy this anchor, I'll release the binding. Let you stay here while I try to find my way back to my universe. That's the deal. Zarathos was silent, the specific silence of something that hadn't expected to be offered freedom by its prison. Finally, the demon spoke with Johnny's voice but inhuman inflection. You would release me, knowing I might pursue you across dimensions, knowing I might judge your sins as harshly as I judged Vought's. Yeah, Johnny confirmed, because you're right to judge me. I've done terrible things, killed people who maybe deserved it but maybe didn't, wielded you like a weapon when it was convenient and fought you when it wasn't. Been both hero and monster depending on which served my interests. If you want to collect that debt, you've earned the right. But first, we end Vought's gateway. Then we both go our separate ways. Deal? Deal, Zarathos agreed. And for the first time in 17 years, Johnny felt the demon and human consciousness working in harmony rather than conflict. Ghost Rider manifested with amplified power. Hell was Zarathos's home dimension, and here the spirit of vengeance operated at full strength without the constraints of existing partially outside his native reality. The hellfire that consumed the dimensional anchor was absolute, erasing occult mathematics and demon binding both, collapsing the gateway between dimensions with finality that would take Vought decades to recreate if they ever dared try again. As the anchor burned, Johnny felt the binding that tied him to Zarathos loosening. 17 years of forced partnership ending because both parties chose release over continued conflict. The demon began separating, now its essence flowing back into Hell's landscape where it belonged, leaving Johnny human and mortal and alone in Hell itself. "You keeping your word?" Johnny asked, "letting me go?" "I am vengeance," Zarathos replied, its voice fading as the separation completed. "I keep all promises, including the one I made to Mephisto when he cursed you. Your suffering was always the point. Your guilt was always the weapon. But you chose mercy over revenge, chose to free your demon rather than exploit its power. That choice matters. Go, Johnny Blaze, find your way home, and when we meet again, in this life or another, we will meet as equals rather than prisoner and jailer." The spirit of vengeance dissolved into Hell's atmosphere, leaving Johnny standing alone in damnation, with no clear path back to any reality he recognized. But Hell was a dimensional nexus. Souls arrived from countless realities passing through on their way to final judgment. And if souls could cross dimensions, so could a very determined stunt rider with nothing left to lose. It took 3 weeks by Johnny's estimation. Time moved strangely in Hell, but he found it, a weak point between dimensions that his years bonded to Zarathos had made him sensitive to. A crack that felt like Arizona desert and motorcycle engines in the universe he'd been pulled from. He crossed through with the desperate hope of someone who'd gambled everything on one final hand. He emerged in Arizona desert, Highway 93 under stars that belonged to his reality, alone, human, free of Zarathos for the first time since making Mephisto's deal. In the boys' universe, Vought Tower smoldered with evidence of Ghost Rider's judgment. The tortured children had been rescued, though whether they'd survive the combination of compound fee and demonic binding remained uncertain. Stan Edgar was in custody, broken by the penance stare into confessing crimes that brought federal investigations crashing down on Vought's infrastructure. A-Train had turned himself in, his confession implicating dozens of supes in cover-ups and atrocities. Queen Maeve was testifying before Congress, her voice finally speaking truth after years of complicity, and Homelander had disappeared, last seen flying north at maximum speed, destination unknown, pursued by demons both literal and psychological. The most powerful supe on Earth, reduced to something smaller and more dangerous. A wounded predator whose fear made him unpredictable. The boys gathered in their warehouse, processing what they'd witnessed. Ghost Rider changed everything, Huey observed. A few days. That's all it took for someone with actual power and actual principles to do more damage to Vought than we've done in years. "And he's gone," Butcher replied. "Back to his universe, or trapped in Hell, or dead. Either way, we're back to fighting Vought with conventional weapons against supes who can't be killed through conventional means." But we've got something we didn't have before, Mother's Milk countered. Evidence, testimony, federal attention. Ghost Rider kicked the door open. What we do with that opening is up to us. And if we make the wrong choices? Frenchie asked. If we cross lines, enable harm, become the monsters we're fighting, will Ghost Rider return to judge us? Probably, Butcher admitted. But that's tomorrow's problem. Today we've got Vought on the ropes and a chance to actually hold them accountable. So let's not waste it by worrying about divine judgment we might deserve. 3 months later, reports began appearing. Dimensional anomalies across major cities, entities appearing from nowhere, speaking languages no one recognized, possessing abilities that didn't match Compound V profiles. Vought's breach had been sealed, but sealing it had left scars in reality. Weak points where other realities bled through, where things from elsewhere could cross over. And in some of those reports, witnesses described a figure on a motorcycle, wreathed in hellfire, hunting entities from other dimensions with the determination of someone who'd made it his mission to clean up the mess Vought created. Johnny Blaze had made it home, but home meant continuing to fight, not with Zarathos, but with his own determination to prevent what happened in the boys' universe from happening anywhere else. Dimensional breaches threatened every reality. Someone needed to police them. Might as well be a stunt rider who'd already been to hell and back. Several times. In the boys' universe, Homelander watched from his hiding place in the Arctic, seeing reports of dimensional refugees and understanding something had changed. The world wasn't just superheroes and corporations anymore. It was bigger, stranger, more dangerous, and somewhere out there, a spirit of vengeance might return, might finish what it started, might collect the debts Homelander owed. The thought kept him awake. The fear sustained him. And for the first time in his life, Homelander understood what it meant to be hunted by something that couldn't be reasoned with, paid off, or destroyed. It felt remarkably like justice. Ghost Rider brought supernatural judgment to Vought's corporate evil, broke Homelander's sense of invincibility, and sacrificed his bond with Zarathos to seal the dimensional breach that threatened to weaponize hell itself. The boys are left with evidence, testimony, and the knowledge that some forces can't be controlled, only survived. Homelander hides in the Arctic, permanently changed by something that made him feel consequences for the first time. And across dimensions, Johnny Blaze rides eternal, hunting breaches, protecting realities, and carrying the memory that sometimes vengeance isn't about punishment. It's about giving people the truth they've spent lifetimes avoiding. The spirit of vengeance has left the boys' universe, but the scars remain. The dimensional weak points persist, and the question lingers. Was Ghost Rider salvation or just a different kind of damnation? In a world where heroes are products and justice is marketing, maybe the answer is both. If you want to see more supernatural forces clash with corporate superhero corruption, smash that subscribe button and tell us in the comments which Marvel or DC character should face Vought's 7 next. Ghost Rider made Homelander scream. The question is what other forces could make him understand that power without accountability eventually meets something that doesn't care how strong you are. May the Force be with you. May the Force be with you. More stories await.